So without further ado, to get us started today, I am very excited to introduce Laura Reese. She is the Vice President of Business Banking at InBank. InBank is a tremendous supporter of DMCAR throughout the year, all year long. We couldn't put on these programs without their support. And Laura is just an excellent example of inspiration, motivation, and drive. Women in our industry look up to her, and we both mentor and create community together. So glad that she said yes to being our sponsor today and making it technologically possible for us to spend this time together. Laura, the stage is yours.
Oh, thank you. We are so excited to have this opportunity to help get the Women in Commercial conversation started the first time around. I won't take up too much time because I know we are all here to hear Mary impart her wisdom on what her driving factors and success in her career has looked like. But as Katie said, InBank is a big supporter of DMCAR. We love what the group is doing. I love the fact that we have a chance now to make it even more special and focus on women in commercial. Quick history, if you have not heard of InBank, we like to call ourselves the 100-year-old startup bank. We operated in New Mexico and one branch in Colorado for about 100 years. And then 2 years ago, a group of founders came together and decided that there was an opportunity in our market to reinvent the bank as a really heavily focused bank on community, small business. I have the honor of running our business banking team at InBank. One of the, obviously this year has been chaotic to say the least for us all. We had an opportunity though in times of crisis as a bank that touts community as their primary focus. We had a chance to, in about 3 months, put on 320 paycheck protection program loans for our community. Some of those were existing clients. We also took that opportunity to expand our reach and our services to other businesses in the community that were struggling to secure those funds through some of the larger institutions that they might have banked with. So that ended up equating to $250 million in loans and support that we were able to plug back into our community. And I thought it was really interesting. The SBA reported that during the first round of its Paycheck Protection Program, 20% of its loans were funded by banks with $1 billion or less in assets. And just to put some numbers and scope behind that, the first round of lending delivered about $300 billion to 1.7 million businesses. So it was a great time to be a smaller community bank in the market. I loved what our company did. I loved how our employees stepped up and worked the line.
Oops.
Laura, I think we lost you there. We will reconnect with Laura here in a minute when she comes back with us.
I'm sorry, I tried. Sorry, I'm not sure what happened there. I apologize, but I was wrapping up anyway, so I won't take any more time. But we are here. We are here as a resource for everybody on this call. If you have any questions or just wanted to understand more about the financial climate and how we are all helping support businesses in the community, we're definitely here. Feel free to reach out. And thank you again, Katie and DMCAR, for the opportunity to support the Women in Commercial conversation. So sorry about that.
All right. Good comeback. Thank you, Laura. Thank you for the support, InBank. All right. On to the main attraction here. You cannot talk about the history of commercial real estate in Colorado without talking about Mary Sullivan, an impressive 35-year real estate and finance finance career resulted in more than $10 billion in transaction production. Mary Sullivan is without question one of the most successful commercial real estate professionals in Colorado's history. I have had the honor of meeting with and working with Mary over the years on different projects and getting to spend time with her one-on-one. And every time I walk away from one of those meetings, I feel stronger and more clear about what I want to do with my own life. And so I called Mary, and she was gracious enough to say yes to both answering all kinds of questions about her personal and professional journey and being recorded today and really sharing some of this spirit with all of you. So Mary, we're about to ask you about secrets to success, what drives you, pivotal people in your career, and boy, do we have questions for you. As I mentioned, you have been one of the most celebrated commercial real estate professionals in Colorado's history. And so we want you to go back in time. We want you to journey really far back and look at how you decided in the very beginning to get into this business and why on earth you would want to do something like that.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being invited and asked to participate in your very first, women focused collaborative group. So I'll start out. I'd like to tell you that when I was 3 years old, I was riveted on being a commercial real estate, commercial broker, but that's not at all how that happened. My first, I'll just go back a bit. My first job, so to speak, was I was one of Celestial Seasoning's first employees. And that was really in the early 70s. And during my time at Celestial Seasonings, which was thought to be a new age company, I hit my head on that, glass ceiling, that proverbial glass ceiling. It's more like I cracked my head on it and, realized that, while I was at Celestial, after the first experience of, having sold the largest account that they couldn't even fill the order that came in after I had sold it. And I got back to Boulder and they took me off the account and put a guy on it because clearly it was too important for me to handle, even though I had sold it. And so I had decided that I was going to go back to school and get my degree in accounting and finance. And I chose accounting and finance because when I was, on the road for Celestial, I was meeting a lot of these young hippies that had started these natural foods distribution companies. And I had asked them, what about your business do you wish you had a better handle on and don't? And to a person, they said the accounting and finance function. So when I got back to Boulder, I got my degree, went back, got my degree. And I had a lot of different jobs at Celestial. It was an experiential gold mine. The last one was strategic planning director. And at one point, Mo said, if your bonus is going to depend, Mary, on you getting those, the vice presidents to put their plan in on time. And I said, you can't do that. I'm their subordinate, not their, boss. Make me executive VP. And that's the layer between you and them. And then I have leverage. He said, let me think about it. That was a Friday. Monday, he came back and he said, I can't do that, Mary. He said, all the VPs are guys. It just won't sit very well. Again, I thought, all right, well, it's time for me to get the hell out of here because I'm not going to go anywhere. I called a man that I had met while at Celestial Seasonings, who was the head of all of Kemper's equities for the United States. So he invested all of Kemper Insurance's equities. And I asked him to, help me. I thought I'd go back east, cut my teeth, in a finance career because that's my degree. And he said, oh, don't do that, Mary. The East is dying. So he put me up with a developer that he helped launch, Peter Bedford. And I became project manager on an industrial development out by the old airport. And it was ground up development. It was really, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I was the only one in the office when I wanted to have a good heart-to-heart conversation with somebody, I went into the bathroom and looked in the mirror. And, so I, went from there to Peter came in. I worked for him for about 2 years. This is in the late 70s, and interest rates went to 22%. And as a developer, we were paying 3 points over prime, so 25% on unleased space. And Peter at the time said, Mary, you can come back to California and work for me there, but I can't continue to develop outside of my backyard. And he was out of San Francisco. At the time, I was dating Sherman, and I didn't really want to leave Colorado. So I declined, and he was very gracious to say, I'll keep you on the payroll till you find another job.
Wow.
And so I thought, great. I then also assessed, I said, my degree is in accounting and finance. What the hell am I doing in real estate? And so I went about interviewing with all the big board, what they now call investment banking, but the big board firms, and thought that I wanted to get into commodities. And I interviewed with one commercial real estate company, and that was called Coldwell Banker Commercial at the time, now CBRE. And I'd like to say that I was offered 2 jobs with, 2 of the big board firms. And then CB offered me a job at the same, all this is all coming together at the same time. And I'd like to tell you that I was very analytical, and I sat down and did an analysis of, which industry to go into, but I would be lying. It was a knee-jerk reaction. I said, I'm going to go commercial real estate. And that's how I got into commercial real estate.
I love the story, Mary. One of the things you said was that Celestial Seasoning, it was an experiential gold mine. And I love that because at DMCAR, we mentor 100 people a year. So often we hear people say, I'm stuck, I'm stuck, I'm stuck. And sometimes they don't know today that is going to provide for them tomorrow. These days that we're spending in jobs where we're not sure it's sending us anywhere. All right, Mary, when you look back over this whole journey from the beginning to a few years ago, when you stepped back a little bit, would you say you would do it again? When you're looking at some of your biggest moments or some of your lowest moments, is there anything you would share about the hills and the valleys and the journey overall?
I would definitely do it again. It was a really good, a blind choice, but a really good choice for me. I knew that when I had left Peter Bedford, I knew that I had financial goals, and I had rather aggressive financial goals. And I knew that I had to land a job where, I would have to depend upon my own efforts to realize those goals. So I couldn't depend upon a man to mentor me or to promote me, because at that time, really, there was no such thing as EEOC. The equal opportunity, just did not, equal employment opportunity did not exist. And, really, there were very few women, period. And, in industry. And so in commercial real estate, there were virtually none. And so it was, I was at the right place in the right time. And so, coming into commercial real estate in the early 80s, I was lucky because it was the advent of when, and institutions, pension funds began to allocate money to real estate. So would I do it all over again? I was at the right place, the right time, and the stars aligned. And when you asked, what was, like one of the achievements that I thought was most interesting, but also most proud of, it was, the sale of 5 of the CBD assets for Blackstone. And that was actually, I had 3 of those CBD assets in the market because Equity Office Properties owned them, but, and I was marketing 3 of the 5 that they owned in the CBD. And at that time, Blackstone was on a buying binge, buying, real estate investment trusts. And they negotiated a deal with Sam Zell to buy equity office properties. And I knew Jonathan Gray, who was the head of Blackstone's real estate. And I had met him when he was actually a junior analyst at Blackstone. And at that time, it was very interesting to be under the tent, so to speak, when Blackstone, acquired or was offered to buy EOP. During that time, they were going to acquire it for $40 billion. And as it turned out, Vornado got into the bidding war for EOP. And I watched this bidding war occur between Blackstone and Vornado. And it was interesting to be under the tent because, as one of the Blackstone guys said to me, we're at war here. This isn't anything else. We are out to win. So instead of paying $40 billion for EOP, they ended up paying $60 billion for it. When Jonathan Gray called me and he said, Mary, you're under contract with 3 of these assets. And he said, we'll honor that deal. He said, but do you think that that's a good deal? And I said, no, I don't. If there's any way that during the process they come back and ask you to retrade it, flush the deal. And here's 3 assets, 3 CBD assets that I'm telling him to kill. And I don't know if he's going to sell them again or not. But I just said, no, you're not getting a good price, and this is why. And so when it came to the point that Blackstone won and they had to pay $20 billion more, then what was fantastic about it is that I ended up with not 3 CBD assets, but 5 CBD assets. And they turned around and sold. They had intended originally to hold 60% of that portfolio and, sell off 40%. They ended up selling off 60% and keeping 40% because of the increase in price. And the fascinating thing about it, or what I'm most proud of, is that Eastdil got 100% of the dispositions from Blackstone, except for Denver. I was the only broker in the entire country that was outside of the Eastdil's, brokerage group that got an assignment from Blackstone. So that was a high, and it was a $770 million. We got that deal done from beginning to close in 40 days. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. So, and you ask about a low point?
I love that story.
Start at a low point. Maybe I should start. One of the toughest things that I had to go through was right at the beginning of my career. And it was, when I started at CB, it was 1981. And that's again when pensions started allocating money to commercial real estate. I was at the right place, right time. And I was the only nerd out there that was doing discounted cash flows by hand on accounting sheets, because there was no Argus, there were no financial programs, there were barely any computers, and certainly not personal computers. And the pension community really appreciated, the advisors appreciated that I knew what a DCF was, that I was actually providing it and telling him what, what the internal rate of return was, figuring out cap rates, doing that tenant by tenant. And so, my success took off pretty quickly. And in 1984, it was just a boom year. And I had been only in the business for 3 years, and I grossed $500,000. I was like, oh my God, I've landed at the right place. And of course, 1985, we hit the wall and we went into a real estate recession that most of the country referred to the real estate recession of the early 90s. We hit it in 1985. Denver was first in. And I went from $500 million gross in 84 to $50,000 in 85. And that was at least to say a real shock to the old system. And Denver remained in a real estate recession for 6 years. It wasn't an overnight comeback. It was 6 very long years. And it wasn't until 1991 that we really started to come out. And I remember saying to Sherman, you know, and this was like in 1990 or 91, I said, I'm beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel here. And he said, are you sure it's not a train coming in the other direction? So surviving those 6 years was a real challenge.
Thank you so much for sharing the lows. I think we have to hear both the highs and the lows, from $500 million to 50,000. I think we all need to feel that right now for a minute, what a 6-year recession looks like. I think most of us can say with confidence, we don't think we're going through something like that right now, something that long, but to know you've made it and to have had so much success afterward feels really good to hear, and just to be with somebody who can be smiling just 20 years later. All right, we're going to change directions a little bit. You're a household name now. You're an icon in our business, and most people, even if they haven't met you, know your name. But was there ever a time when you were lesser known, when being a woman created an extra hurdle or some kind of apathy around doing business with a client? And what did you do about it?
Again, I was really fortunate because the clients that I focused on the institutional side of the business, and they were more aware. They were more interested in the information that you could provide them. And because of my financial background, I was doing a very professional job, which today is just expected. Back then, it was just too new. And so from an institutional client standpoint, there wasn't any problem. They didn't care if my hair was green or if I was a man or a woman. It was that I was really giving them the financial analysis on an asset for potential acquisition. And that really made me stand apart from others that not only in this market, but other markets as well, particularly in the beginning. I only felt a couple of times, that real, and it wasn't from institutional clients. It was more the private client side of it that, the private equity fund, or that was more of a family office that, there was a reticence, not willing. I mean, I remember one guy, I think it was Patronelli, that was a developer. And he said, why would I ever do business with a woman? Really just flat out. There was another time where I was under contract selling. It was a sale leaseback on a property. And this guy that was their acquisition guy just was a chauvinist. You could just see it. And this is when HP 12Cs, the little calculator, had first come out. And we were sitting around the table negotiating with my client and this acquisition guy. And he said, okay, gentlemen, let's pull out our HP 12Cs. And he knew I didn't have one. And he went, oh, Mary, sorry, I guess you don't have one. And I said, oh, I didn't think that you were talking to me. You did say, gentlemen, pull out your HP 12Cs. And, that just kind of, I went out that afternoon and bought one. However, that was that kind of trying to differentiate or make me feel unwanted in the room happened so infrequently. It really did. With the institutional clients, I will say my colleagues, my co-brokers, would have liked to. Actually, there was a point in time when there was a group of them that actively tried to get me fired. And because I was doing better than the three of them combined. And so they'd much prefer to have me out and not as a competitor at all. But that was just typically from, I felt more of that from other brokers than I did from clients.
Yeah, I love your story, Mary. And sometimes today I get this question all these years later, and I tell young women, competency always wins. And it sounds like it often won back then. And, the grit where you just, at first I thought you were going to say, I went out and bought, a fifth of whiskey or something, but you went out and bought the tool you needed and went back to work. And I love that. I recall one time I met with you and I was down a little bit. I'd gotten kind of worked over in a meeting, and we were talking about it together. This was several years ago, and you were so quiet and you listened and listened. And then you just told me, bury them with your success. And I will, you might as well have said, bury them in your backyard, but I will never forget that. It changed me. And I've shared that quote of yours many times and on stage when you got the Lifetime Achievement Award. So I hope that's okay. I'm doing it here.
Of course.
Okay. Let's talk about, let's see here. Okay. Pivotal people in your career, Mary. We want to know, is there somebody that became a confidant, and how did you choose your mentors or not choose your mentors? You said earlier that, when you needed you needed some love or you needed a second opinion, you would go and look in the mirror and have a conversation with yourself. Was that always true, or were there times when you had really instrumental confidants that were with you?
Well, again, there were very few women, and there really weren't women that were available as mentors. It just, it was a male dominated industry, and it was a white male dominated industry, and it hasn't changed all that much. I will tell you that somebody that was very pivotal was a manager that I had after I was well into my career. But Ray Pittman became the manager at the CB office, and he went on a pitch with me. So, he asked if he could come along, and I said, of course, I'd love to have you there. And on the way back to the office, he was so complimentary. He was like, God, Mary, you're awesome. I would give you that business in a heartbeat. Your presentation was great. I mean, he was just really very complimentary. And he came back to the office and he said, I was putting together my own, like punching my presentation books, doing my own copying, going down to Kinko's, and, having them, put together my RFP, books before they were, due. And he said, you need a team around you. You need to have somebody that's, that's not the highest and best use of your time. You need to be out there and you need to be bringing the business in. That's the only thing you should be focusing on, not all this other stuff. I was writing, the responses to the RFP. I was, I was doing absolutely everything. And, so he was one who helped me build a team around me. And once I was able to have that support team around me, then I could focus 100% on keeping my pipeline full and bringing business in and developing business. And that was a major shift. I would credit him for catapulting me to the next level. That was phenomenal. As far as a confidant, I was incredibly fortunate to have Sherman. As Sherman was my husband. He was my partner in the same industry. We knew all the same players. We had to be careful not to talk about business at the dinner table because we could really get going. And, we had to consciously ask the kids about their day at school and not get off on a tangent. But he was, excuse me, my biggest cheerleader. I mean, he was my biggest supporter. He was absolutely, he believed in my abilities. And if ever I was feeling a little like the wind was knocked out of my sails, he'd help to blow them back up. So incredibly fortunate to have somebody that was a partner and so amazingly supportive.
Thank you for sharing that. We love Sherm at DMCAR. He was so special to me early in my career, and I love all of our memories of him on our committees. And I love this comment that you made about consciously asking your kids about their days at the dinner table. I have that same goal right now. My husband and I both, he's in oil and gas and I do this, and we like to talk business and we love our work. So I'm glad to hear that was a different hurdle I didn't expect you to talk about, but a very real reality.
Yeah.
All right. We have a couple of minutes before we're going to stick to allowing Q&A at 10:35. So a couple of minutes. Is there something at the core of you that really got you through everything, no matter what? When we're talking about the market conditions of today, was there a saying or a belief or something deep inside that was a place you went to rejuvenate and keep you going under all circumstances?
Well, I think that, when I reflect back on this, it's when I first got to CB, we're in a sea of cubicles. And, it was, there were the other brokers that were literally making bets loud for my benefit, loud enough so I could hear about how long do you think this one's going to last? So they were making bets on my failure. And I've often thought about if they had been a welcoming group, would I have been as successful? I think yes, but what really drove me, particularly then, was I'm going to be damned if I'm going to let any one of these assholes see me fail. Just not going to happen. And, I think that what drove me was failure wasn't an option. And when things got difficult, or, you're going to win and lose business, that's how it works. But it really comes back to that whole thing. I think it was Churchill that said, never, never, never give up, and that's it. If I had goals, I had financial goals. I say to my daughter, do not be one man away from welfare. Now, I had an incredible relationship with Sherman, and Sherman was very successful. But I never wanted to rely on someone else to achieve the goals that I had in mind. That's not fair. It's up to me. And, so I knew that if I wanted to be successful, it was on my shoulders, not on someone else's. And so the idea that failure wasn't an option, and don't ever get up, and never let them see you cry. Particularly as a woman in business.
That's well-received advice. All right, ladies, and we have 10 wise men out there who are with us today. Say hey, hey, or put your questions in the chat box, and we will call on you, and you will unmute and ask Mary all on your own, just like we would be doing if we were all together. Mary, while they're getting their questions typed in, I'm going to go ahead with one more for you. Today, you are a special guest as we launch this new program that it's all based on community and camaraderie as our industry evolves, and we better prepare for a new kind of client, for far more women CEOs and hedge fund managers across the country. What do you see as an advantage or opportunity that women should embrace today that maybe wasn't there when you started?
Well, I think that women should embrace being a woman. Being a woman is one of our strongest assets. So, I'd always try to keep in mind, don't lose your femininity. Don't forget who you are. And, I think that, there are more women in industry, thank God. And I like to think that a lot of those women are very supportive of other women becoming successful. That's not always the case. I think we all know women that like to be the only woman in the room. And, that's really too bad. So I think that, being a woman is an asset. Often it'll open doors for you that like the clients are sick of dealing with other men. And so it will open doors, and being able to develop those relationships. I think women are far more empathetic. I think they're better listeners, and I think that they are good problem solvers. So I think just embrace being a woman and use it to your advantage. That would be my advice.
I love that. And we are about to get into a little bit more of your personal routine. Here's one for you. Do you have daily habits that you swear by? Is there something that you read every morning? Do you have a certain bedtime? What did you do? What do you swear by?
Well, I think that when I was working and had little kids at home, I mean, I think this probably applies to more than, being on the other side of it, which I am now. I'd get up very early in the morning. I mean, I'd be up at 4:30 and 4:45, and I'd be at the gym, first thing at 5. I'd work out, come home. Sherman would go to the gym. I'd get ready. He'd come home. I'd go to work, and he'd get the kids off to school. Always we had dinner with the kids, always. So it was important to have that family time. And again, like thinking about the kids' day, not our day, and do my very best. I was really good at leaving the office at the office. Sherman brought it home a lot. And so we had to just kind of say no. And then, going to bed, there's a really a good practice of just reviewing your day. And, I'd like to review my day more in light of, particularly as I became more and more successful and had a team around me. I'd like to think, was I kind to everyone today? I mean, how did I treat those that are making me successful and making me look good? And that was the support team. My support team made me look really good. And, was I mindful of that? Was I short with somebody on the phone? Well, how did I conduct myself today? And that practice led to, if I felt as though I didn't act appropriately, I would the very next day go back and either say to my team, I'm sorry I came in like a tornado yesterday. We were under deadline. I really apologize if I didn't, I came in barking orders. Or if I was short with somebody, personal life or professional life, call them and own it. Say, I'm terribly sorry that I was off my game yesterday. I don't want to leave that conversation the way it was. And I think that builds, it builds a much different relationship with people. And I think that it builds some loyalty and also respect for one another, not just one way.
Oh, that's wonderful. I can see how that would keep a long-term cohesive team. Thank you for sharing that detail. Marcy Moneypenny, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Good morning, Mary. It's good to see you and hear more about just your experience and your expertise. So this was my question for you. If you are active in the biz today, what are the top 3 things you would be doing to serve your existing clients while actively developing new business?
Hi, Marcy. It's good to see you too. This is the time when the markets were down. This is when you double down. This is not when you go, well, there's nothing going on. I might as well get my, improve my golf game, or, improve my tennis game, or whatever. Today, even though I'm not in the business, I call my former clients and see how they're doing. It's asking personally, how are you doing? How's business going? What's happening? What's happening out there? And seeing what they have to say and what is going on. And if I was still actively in the business, a lot of those phone calls will lead to information about, yeah, this is happening, or this is what's going on, or we're looking at this. And it helps to then seed other ideas of people that you should be calling and also nurturing new business. And we all know, we all know clients that may not be doing business with, with us at the time. I mean, JP Morgan was a great example of, a client that gave business to a competitor after I had actually been told by Blackstone that I won the business. And I made a point to go and meet that fund manager, and not to say, oh, hey, how come I didn't get that business? I was told, but to say, it's my fault that I didn't know you or develop a relationship with you prior, and I don't want to have that happen again. So I'm calling you to let you know what's going on in our market. I'd be calling people that I don't have as clients and trying to develop and give them information that they may find valuable now, and they'll come back to me again. It's on me.
All right, Sharon
Thank you.
Salazar, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Hi, good morning. I just wanted to know what courses or certifications you would recommend to be better than we are now. You mentioned that your niche, I guess, was finance. You had a finance that made you kind of better than other realtors. Is that something that you would recommend if that wasn't a strong point?
Well, good morning, Sharon. It depends upon, what your specialty is. Mine was institutional investment sales. Having that background was very beneficial. I really understood the numbers. I knew what went into them. But, if you're in, commercial leasing or office leasing, or, it's probably more organizations and networks. I'm not really, I would look to think, I'd probably look and say, what do I think I need to know to help me in my career, in my specialty? Is there something that is, that would assist me? I think some tenant rep brokers that, are, that specialize in a particular industry. What could I do to learn more about that industry? But I don't think that necessarily everybody in commercial real estate needs to have a background in finance and accounting, that's for sure. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
We are going to attempt to shoehorn in one more question, and I ask Katie Gates to unmute and ask your question of Mary.
Thanks, Katie, and thank you so much, Mary. Mary, when you were talking about the recession in the 80s, did you ever think about changing courses, or how did you keep from giving up then? Or did you ever think about getting, a new industry a shot?
Thanks for the question. I really, didn't. And there was a really good reason that I didn't. I really felt as though, again, remember back then, women were not prominent in other industry. I had already experienced hitting my head, on that ceiling of, just this isn't going to work. And so I just thought, this cannot last forever. I mean, I used to talk to clients and they'd go, how much longer do you think this is going to last? And I'd say, 2 years. And then 2 years, it'd be like, how much longer do you think this is going to last? And I'd say 2 years. And then, meanwhile, we're in it 4 years. And then by the next time they'd ask, I go, I have no idea. But I kept just putting one foot in front of the other. I kept my head down and I kept just doing my best. I mean, I was getting small deals. I was getting some business. I wasn't totally void of business. I mean, I was actually getting some deals done, but it certainly was not like 1984 when it was $500 million. It was certainly not that. I was clawing my way back. And as long as I knew that there was business to be had, it's just again, don't give up. And I felt as though I had landed a job in the industry that I had the best shot of being able to realize my financial goals. So I refused to give it up.
Thanks.
I love that answer, and we needed to hear that and feel your toughness at this time out here in the world. All right, everybody, unmute and join me in giving a round of applause and some cheers for Mary. Mary, thank you so much for being here with us. Woo!
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Loved having you, all of it, Mary. Thank you for all the candid advice.